But we first begin our journey with Mona Ghadiri, a Senior Director of Product Management at Bluevoyant. What struck me the most about our conversation was her unique approach to implementing AI. Instead of focusing solely on what AI can do, Mona suggests that companies should start by testing what AI can't do.
Say, is your POC end goal or success criteria having this thing poop something out for you? Or is it showing you that it won't do things you don't want it to do?
This counterintuitive approach could be the key to building trust in AI systems within organizations. By demonstrating the limitations and safeguards of AI, companies can address concerns head on and pave the way for more confident adoption.
Hi, my name is Mona Ghadiri. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at a company called Bluevoyant. We're Microsoft's #1 security partner, and I am an expert in SIM and XDR. So I'm here to chat with you about AI. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we've been talking to a lot of people about AI adoption, particularly around security. And in your experience, over this past year and a half, what has that been like when working with different companies? And what are they thinking about when trying to bring in particularly generative AI into the workplace?
Definitely. I think there's two camps. There are people who are like, I want to build my own cabinets. I'm going to do my own thing. And that's kind of the open AI camp, right? You could think of them as being the ones who want to control all the parts of making their own dinner or
Right.
building their own cabinets or whatever. And then there's another group of people who say, you know what, my expertise isn't in AI. I'm an expert in shoes. I'm an expert in real estate. I'm an expert in whatever. I want someone else to do the cabinets. I want to be the one to tell you, do the cabinets need to be tall enough to fit a cereal box or a tin can? How many do we need to have in here, right? And have a different conversation than about what are the cabinets themselves. I think people are getting lost in the infrastructure conversation instead of focusing on, well, what is the quality of the data? Who can access the data? How is that permission inheritance happening, right? Are you using things like Microsoft to do those things, or are you trying to do them on your own? And I think as those two camps kind of grow, one is about securing the infrastructure and how do we use existing tools and technologies, whether you're a Splunk shop or a Microsoft shop or whatever, to manage and monitor the infrastructure or monitor the users using the infrastructure. But then you also have the concept of who's copying and pasting things in and out of these things, right? How can we control the data that is generated by these things? Are those considered IP? And if they are, right, how do we need to protect those in more of a DLP kind of insider risk, kind of consideration instead of this infrastructure problem? And so I think depending on what their appetite is for security and how much they want to do, folks are falling in one of each of these camps. And then as they kind of consider their options, I think the cost and who's going to use it and that return on investment conversation kind of goes to the front instead of it being, oh, well, if we plug these things in, we're going to get something. Wouldn't that be cool?
You bring up a lot of really good points. I love the analogy of that, do you want to build it yourself and build that cabinet, or do you want to, rely on the professionals who do this every day?
I want to focus on what's inside, right? And I think for me, right, I'm a DevOps person, and I'm sitting here saying that because I know just how much goes into, I have to update the model, I have to update the permissions, I have to stay on top of who's accessing all of this. It's a lot. I don't want to do that. I've got enough other things to do trying to run a security operations center. So for me, it's way more valuable to have somebody like Microsoft or some other third party managing the SaaS application of the LLM, right? Instead of me trying to put it all together and somehow make really nice cabinets when that's not really my expertise.
Yeah, one of the things I think that I've found is that it's very good, easy to do a POC, but hard to put into production. And a big deal of that is around data governance. And you talked a lot about that earlier. What have you seen work, and what is kind of like the first step of, making sure that you have the right data governance? Because companies weren't really great at it to begin with. And now that you have something that's producing an infinite amount of data, how do you even begin?
I think there's a conversation around structured and unstructured data, right? Because the LLM will do better with structured data than unstructured data in some cases, or you have to put a ton in to get the unstructured data to a semi-structured or structured kind of place. So if you're starting from there, that's one thing. If you're starting from a retention place, right, with governance, I think that's almost a different conversation, right? How long do I need to keep the data for? Who has access to the kept data? Where is it being kept and stored, right? I think is kind of where people get stuck with governance. I think it's easy to say, oh, these are the first 5 people who are going to use it. And they're going to use it on these data sets that they already have access to. But to your point, right, as this data sprawls, the answers and what the LLM generates to me are where the governance conversation needs to start instead of retention or access, or is the data structured or unstructured?
Yeah, it's a really good point because you're now having data and content, as being like a CEO, you kind of want to know what was generated by humans, what was generated by AI.
They store it, right? Like, yeah, because to me, I think there's still a lot of conversations around is if I ask a very specific question and that results in the creation of IP, right? How that IP is transferred, kept, whatever, right? There are all of these other kind of tendrils that touch these things that haven't really been a problem before because we've never, to your point, created this much data at the rate that we're creating it in like the history of time, right? Even like we're blowing through like YouTube and like a lot of these like foreign companies and like all the stuff they were doing to scale out storage. Like we've blown past a lot of those with how much data, AI is generating. You can see that in NVIDIA's stock, right? Their stock went up like crazy, right? So I don't think it's an anomaly.
If you were advising a company, get started, hey, we just don't even know where to start. What would you advise companies to do first?
I think the use cases and the personas is first, right? So I need to come up with my team. Who's going to help me with the Lord of the Rings? Like, where's my axe, right? I want that guy on my team, right? So for me, it's like, who are the 3 or 4 different personas that we can grab onto and say, maybe we all are a team. Maybe we all have the same outcomes. Maybe we can agree on a couple of use cases or designs or whatever that will satisfy all of our needs, right? Because it's never going to be one entity within an organization that's going to be able to make enough of an ROI justification for something like AI. It has to be done as a cross-functional thing. You got to talk to the legal people up front. You got to talk to the infrastructure people up front. And if you don't have that cross-functional team, it's not going to go anywhere, right? I think the second consideration is what is that first milestone, right? Is it the data? Is it the access? Is it the, can we get something from A to B, right? I think that problem of trying to do something from A to B in that POC story is where people stick, that governance stuff gets really sticky. So if there's a way to kind of compress it or make it into a smaller milestone, I think that also really helps. Hey, we proved that nobody who shouldn't have access to this doesn't have access. What a great milestone, right? That's a win. And we didn't have to generate a thing from the AI, right? We just had to prove that it wasn't doing things, right? I'm serious, right? Some of those things are just as valuable as showing that it works, right? So I guess I would push people to say, is your POC end goal or success criteria having this thing poop something out for you? Or is it showing you that it won't do things you don't want it to do? Because I think almost in that case, those negative, keeping me from negative implications is almost more important than proving the thing can start and stop.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can enter anything as a prompt and it'll give you something back. It's whether or not your data is good.
Is your prompt good, right? Do you have the right context? Yeah. Otherwise, what I set up there is you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. And I still believe it, right? Like if you give the AI bad data, don't be mad at the AI that it gave you a bad response. Look at the layer 8 problem, right? That's sitting between you and the keyboard and and think about, how are you trying to shape that? Or how is someone else's job to make sure that those are shaped properly so that when they come to me, I'm not the one thinking about it.
And you talked a little bit about, that there's a company-wide initiative. You can't just be working in these silos because marketing has their use cases and personas, engineering, customer experience and support. And the larger the company, the harder it is to do these cross-functional things. And this has caused a lot of paralysis in the industry because security has their say, legal has their say, all the ICs.
Everything and terrified about, what goes bump in the night. But yeah, I think where I see people struggling the most is really trying to envision what it's not going to do. Right? People are so stuck on what is this going to do for me? What is it going to do for me? Tell me what it's not going to do. Tell me how I'm protected, and you're going to change the narrative within the organization. So then people in legal are like, oh, wait, you're trying to make sure this doesn't do things? That's what I want, right? Instead of I'm trying to prove that this thing does a thing that I know you don't understand, right? Which is just, again, going to give you those negative outcomes. When I'm talking to a development team or those kinds of folks, right, usually they're more eager to adopt, and they're like, give it to me, I'm ready, right? Like, who cares if anybody's pen tested this thing? Like, whatever. And I think for those, like, there has to be a route for early adopters. Saying no is not an answer because people will go around and figure out a way to get what they want, right? If we make the easy thing the right thing, right, then there are fewer likelihoods that someone is going to try to nefariously put data somewhere where it shouldn't be or try to use an online chatbot. So you're asking me about what could someone do, like small pieces. I'm a Microsoft person. They put a ring on it. I'm just going to call it like how it is. But what Microsoft has is what they call AI Hub for Purview. And there's a couple of one-click policies that you can just do you want people to be able to engage with other chatbots on the internet? Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe in a controlled way. For where I work at Bluevoyant, we stood up our own open AI instance, and we're doing the cabinets building ourselves methodology. And we happen to be a firm that has a DevOps practice, and it's part of business, and it's just another resource to them. So for us, that having that easier route to adoption of saying, oh, well, what if we just show you that it's not going to do this? I'll show you it won't give me data I'm not supposed to have. How does that make you feel? Right? I think coupling those two things together of a couple of one-click policies and then showing people that this won't do things actually goes a long way.
That's a really good point. I mean, because then it just gains trust. And I think that's the biggest thing that's lacking in this is trust.
It's going to give you a good answer ever, but I can control whether or not you shouldn't get an answer.
Yeah.
As a security person, I better be able to control that, right? That's one of the benefits of Copilot for Security is it's inheriting all of your Entra ID permissions, right? So if I shouldn't have access to the answer, it's going to tell me I don't have access, right? In the OpenAI model, somebody or something has to be doing that governance because you're giving the machine level access or SPNs, right? Managed identities, other kind of wonky non-human users, right? Which make it a little bit more a little harder to control.
Yeah, you can put any data on it, but you want to make sure that governance around it is secure because you give any data to an LLM, it's going to do something with it.
It doesn't know. And like responsible AI to them is like, I don't want to have like porn shit come back to me, right? They're not thinking about, well, what if I actually do have a use case where I'm a hospital or a domestic violence center and I do need to use those words, right? Today, some of those governance things are overkill because I can't control it. And it does cut out some people from being able to take advantage of that pre-made solution. So I think the governance and that knob is not there yet in AI for us to be able to say, oh, I want to crank it up to 11, right? Or, I'm comfortable with it being at a 2.
You bring up a really good point about the different models and kind of like that tweaking. Have you seen, I guess, and you talked about OpenAI, but there are a lot of other models there, and there's bias in the model about what it won't. Like, for instance, you said, if you're working with domestic violence or something that actually needs to talk about things that are prohibited. How do you see, more sensitive or those types of companies? Are they using different models or what are you seeing?
I think that they're not using any models, right? Because what they're seeing is I lack the granularity to control what is good or okay based on my code of conduct within my organization, right? I think this is a maybe easier thing to do if you're building your own LLM. You can feed it your code of conduct and say, this is what I expect of you. And these are the rules and the governance that's associated with that. But, if you're building that, you're taking that model that's already built, right? You're giving up that for convenience, right? So I think, unfortunately, it means that maybe a domestic violence group would have a really great time using this because they really need the help, right? But they will be turned off for a lot of these compliance reasons or PII or whatever. So I think there's a ton more opportunity in other models, other things to give this granularity and control because it really isn't readily available on the market unless you're buying enterprise like CIEM tools where you're really talking about access and permissions on a much broader scale than more specific to these, what goes in and out of the prompt.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And if our audience wants to get a hold of you for any advice, how would they get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Mona Ghadiri, the only one out there. Or you're welcome to email me, mona.ghadiri@bluevoyant.com.
Well, thank you very much.